Hello and welcome on another video of a literary analysis, and this time I'll be focusing on the lyrics from rap songs, and for that cause I've chosen The Blacker the Berry by Kendrick Lamar as a subject of analysis, not only because it was a very successful song when it first came out and influential for the music industry, but it was also influential in the way that it broadened and artistically displayed the social issues African American people face in society, which has been and always will be an important topic to talk about, but it's especially contemporary after the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement in summer of 2020. And I'd also say it's a useful source if the topic in your school or class focuses on African American experience, because you can really get a lot out of this song. And in the following, I've pointed out several stylistic devices in the first half of the song, although I'm sure you could also interpret a lot into the musical and instrumental choices, but that is just not my area of expertise, so I won't be focusing on that. But before we go into the stylistic devices, the song came out as part of the album To Pimp a Butterfly in February 9th of 2015, produced by Boy Wonder, Terrace Martin, and KOZ, and was certified gold by RIAA. It also faced several controversies, for example, because of the mentioning of the Trayvon Martin shooting in the last verse, and also in general because it tackles very sensitive social topics in this song. But without further ado, we'll start with the intro. And the intro is especially interesting. The intro is by Lamar and also Lala Hathaway, because it's in the first half, as you can see, it's divided into two parts. So you have the repetition of blackness, so especially with the marked red ones, which I labeled for repetitions, you see the sole repetition of everything black, and black is mentioned at least twice in each line. But then on the other hand, you can see what I have marked in white, what's written in brackets, what's I believe said by Lala Hathaway. They don't want us to bow down to our knees and pray to the God we don't believe. I would say it's a form of enjambment because it divides one sentence, or at least a series of sentences, across multiple lines, and it's kind of a subconscious message which you cannot really hear during the song that is said there, which kind of talks about the confusion. Also, they, as in society and white people, they don't want us to bow, and they talk about the submission and the oppression that African American people face, and also the repetition of and the reiteration of everything black, I don't want black. There's this constant antithesis and paradox in his lines, because on one side he wants and desires and deserves everything to be black, and black in this case could stand for many different things, for example the acceptance, but also the visualization of and the adoration of black people in American culture, for example. But on the other side, he also talks about the fact that he does not want black and he does not need black. And we also have a parallelism in line 3, some white, some black. I ain't mean black. And that stands out especially because it's the only times that white is mentioned in the intro, so it stands out because of this singular use. Yes, and he also brings out a metaphor of our eyes ain't black. I own black, I own everything black. And because of that, in the end, he comes to the conclusion in a way in his own intro that he comes to the conclusion that blackness is good, which also introduces the idea of black pride to some extent in his song. And the intro especially visualizes the struggles of African American people in America and in society in general, and also the confusion and frustration and the descent of the author, of Kendrick Lamar himself, and also the repeated occurrences because of these repetitions could also be a representation of the repeated occurrences of struggle and oppression and abuse. And this constant paradox between wanting, deserving more, and the hatred of blackness is also visual in society itself. Now moving on to the bridge. The first line, 6 in the morning, fire in the street, is actually an allusion to a song from Ice-T, and in general talks about the riots, the rallies of the Watts riots, I believe, in 1965. Additionally, by the alliteration "Burn Baby Burn," an homage to DJ Magnificent. And the Watts riots in '65 were in Los Angeles, and they were the breaking point of racial tension at that time. And after that, specific occurrence of police brutality that caused great damage and loss, it foreshadowed more rebellions. For example, the Detroit riots just 2 years after. And alliterations in general are used when you want something to not only sound good but also be poignant and be remembered by the people that hear or read them. So it's natural for a rally cry to be an alliteration because of that reason, and the fact that he used that specific rally cry, "Burn Baby Burn," in his song is also saying a lot. I've also pointed out the rhymes. I could not see that many rhymes, to be quite honest, as in other rap songs, as occur in other rap songs, but they're also shown. They're also kind of used in a very strategic way. If you rhyme vain with shame, you get that kind of opposition and oxymoron between vain and shame, as they are different things but also mostly stem from the same source within the mind. And talking about minds, he also talks about schizophrenia, which was also something he was criticized for. But the schizophrenia image also kind of brings up the topic of double consciousness, which was something the African-American author Du Bois wrote in his book The Souls of Black Folk. And this line is representative of the constant paradox that Lamar uses in his song between black pride and the hatred, and the self-hatred and the hatred of people towards black people, but also the toxic society that surrounds the entire issue. And in the last line, you also see something that happens a lot in this song, which is that there are these typical lines that are racially charged, but also connected to African American people with "black don't crack." I mean, it is often used in a positive connotation, but because of its racial charging, it's also symbolizing the issues that that society faces in that kind of regard. So we come to the first part of the first verse, and he starts out with "I'm the biggest hypocrite of 2015," and I've marked that red because it's actually the way he starts out all his verses, and only in the last verse it becomes clear why he is a hypocrite when he talks about black on black violence. And in this specific verse, the identity crisis becomes evident. As we see in "I'm African American," and then he kind of corrects himself almost, saying "I'm African," where he also uses an anaphora with the same starting word, I am. That also, in my Shakespeare literary analysis, I said that anaphoras usually emphasize what happens afterwards, but in this case I would say that he equals African Americans with the next simile that he uses, "black as the moon." And "black as the moon" in general is also a very interesting image because the dark side of the moon is invisible, and with that he puts black people to the same status. So he also puts black people as invisible in society. We also have this "bottom of mankind," which has a double meaning, and one of them could be that the theory that all people have stemmed from Africa, but also the fact that African American people are generally looked down upon, which is why he called it the bottom. And in the last line of this verse excerpt, we also see an enumeration of racial stereotypes, which he turns around and uses as a source of empowerment. And this is also continued in the next part of the first verse. He starts out with a rhetorical question, "You hate me, don't you?" which is very provocative and also useful to grab the listener's attention, as with the usage of you, not only they, because throughout the song he mostly talks about they. He uses you as in directly targeting everyone who's listening. And there's also this anaphora throughout this part, which is why I've chosen this part, of you. It's a targeting of the listener. And this is the kind of threatening portrayal of the person listening to that is part of a system that oppresses and opposes African American people, saying that their plan is to, or your plan is to terminate my culture. And he villainizes that aspect. And there's also the part of the proud monkey, a racial slur that he, by using proud, also uses as a source of empowerment. And the fact that he rhymed monkey and from me and confession and discretion is, again, as I already mentioned in the last rhyme. These are opposite images of each other that rhyme and connect with each other. So he identifies with the slur, and a confession is the opposite to a discretion. And because of that, it's interesting the way he rhymed that. And button is not only a symbol but also a metaphor, as it could mean many things. It's been said that it could mean the trigger of a gun, but it could also mean his social power that he has as an influential African American rapper. Also, the repetition of feeling and killing is also quite poignant in this part of the verse. And the last part I've read is actually a part of an allusion to the cocaine crisis during the Ronald Reagan era, when cocaine was given to impoverished areas by the CIA, which saying that sabotaging a community, making a killing, you made me a killer, Emancipation of Rio, that saying that killing is an emancipation is as much an antithesis as the cocaine crisis was, by trying to pursue and facilitate a harmful stereotype to the African American society. Then we continue on with the chorus by Assassin, a Jamaican singer, I believe, where we have the repetition of "the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice," which was a positive connotation and was written by quite as many writers, and I believe it was also an old folk saying with the usual positive connotation. And also Tupac said the same thing, but said the darker the berry, the deeper the roots, where he also talked about the sexualization of black women. And in the 80s and 90s, it was a metaphor and also used in African American literature. So this, also the title of the song, is an allusion to all of that. And in the end, with that repetition, you get a parallelism. Instead of "the sweeter the juice," he says, "the bigger I shoot," police brutality, referencing police brutality. And what I also saw throughout the chorus was also the repetition of saying something, using passive speech as a way to dismantle the stereotypes that are brought against black people. And there's also this continued dismantling of the bad connotations that African American people get by using the negative connotations of racism and turning it around to become empowering. For example, they Assassin references the chains of slavery, while he also uses chains in the next line as a gold chain, as a form of wealth, as a form of power. The same thing he does with whip, whip as in slavery and whip as in car. And with the last part of the chorus, remember this, every race starts from the block, just remember that. Because he, on both sides, encloses the every race starts from the block, it becomes emphasized even further, and it widely propagates further that theory that everyone started from the block, everyone started from somewhere, or again with the theory that all people come from Africa. Yes, a song full of allusions, a song with many social issues, a song that is quite important to current discussions. So sorry if this was a bit rambly, to be honest, but it is what it is. These are my references. I hope you have a nice day.